made it back without too much traffic, so that's always the upside of COVID is the traffic is lower. Is that Logan in your car? We have
Yes, I'm leaving a friend's house now, and I got my notification, and I was like, oh, I'll be like Barb on Sunday, and I'll just tune in my car.
we have road trip Bible study. This is great. Welcome everybody.
Hello.
Yay. I think Dave's coming on. Um, how's your mom doing, Kathy? Did she get any updates?
It's been a rough week, but we're making it through.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, everybody's pretty afraid of nursing homes. It's going to be a rough go. Ugh. So we are at back in the saddle here with Matthew chapter 5 and the Sermon on the Mount. Thanks for the feedback last week, and I had submitted a draft version of the Bible study that we worked on last week, and the same comments that you had, the editor had already picked up on. So I guess you guys are now officially editors of great renown. So we'll see what else they come up with when we see what the final version looks like. I guess the Bible studies for the compelling vision are coming out in February or March. I think I read in the the what is it, the mailing that comes out from the denomination and the
The
um,
Newsline.
yeah, Newsline. Yeah, I think that's what they said.
Okay.
So welcome. So we're back to um, our Bible study. I left Lyle and Vivian at the church. They were doing a plumbing disaster, avoiding a plumbing disaster at the church in the kitchen sink that seemed whenever you turned on the faucet, the water came out, everything except the faucets. We'll see what happens there. They may be busy. So I was looking at the past verses. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of justice. Blessed are you when they insult you and call you every name. That doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun to me. I always wondered about that verse. And then I was looking at John Deere. He's a Catholic priest who was at the annual conference 2 or 3 years ago to do the pre-conference teaching for continuing education, and he wrote a book called The Nonviolent Life. And he was saying, if anybody insults you and calls you every name on account of me, that we should be celebrating and rejoicing. And so that means that we're no longer irrelevant. So someone want to read this? We have Fox News in here and the New York Times and Washington Post. Anybody want to read that quote? Right here on,
The one from Fox News?
yeah, on page starts and on page 101, that section there.
Sure, I'll read it. You'd never know from watching Fox News that organized nonviolent resistance on a national level could bring dramatic nonviolent change, or that a global grassroots movement of nonviolence was slowly sweeping over the world. You don't read about it much in the New York Times or the Washington Post. Mainstream U.S. media is not interested in nonviolent social change. They're trying to make billions of dollars, and that's not what nonviolence is about.
So now we have COVID, and now we have a whole bunch of movements that seem to be making the news. Do you think that do you think that he's right that there's a there's a movement that was kind of invisible?
Doesn't feel like it to me necessarily. That doesn't mean it's not happening, but I think I have a tendency to watch news that I probably hadn't ought to be watching, And it just feels like there's a lot of conflict right now, at least in our country. Now, in terms of the world, I don't know. I mean, we're not, other than the Middle East, we're not, I don't know that we're at war that much, but I don't know.
Right.
It's an interesting perspective.
Right. So he was a priest during the 60s when there was a lot of protest, and the Berrigan brothers, I don't know if anybody, they were protesting about missile silos and the US military using their money on weapons. And he was part of that movement. And they were put in jail for beating swords into plowshares. They went and beat on some missile silos, and that didn't go over real well with the US government. And so they were pretty much radical and thrown into jail for their protest. And he's coming, and he's been talking about Sermon on the Mount ever since the 1960s. He says he reads it every day, the passages, at least some verses from the Sermon on the Mount, every single day.
Well, nonviolence, it doesn't appeal. I mean, it doesn't have drama the way violence has drama. I mean, I think that's why banging on a missile or pouring blood on a underground missile, it at least attracts attention and gets notice. And so that's what news is all about. It's about, something that's going to attract people's attention. But a nonviolent march, which I think part of what this is saying is like, what is there to report on? There's nothing happening. There's nothing here that's newsworthy. And it just it's back to the, turn the world on its head as to what is Christian behavior, justice, and peace about, as opposed to ordinary worldly violence. We know how to, bash, smash, and shoot and kill each other. And that's always of great interest.
Blessed are the meek. Oh, that's exciting. Blessed are the poor. That's riveting.
And I think part of it too, obviously we saw a lot of people in the streets this year in the United States. And boy, I think that it takes a lot to get a lot of people in the streets. In other words, there's a lot of, whatever the issue is, racism or injustice, maybe that's the better term. And, there's folks at work to make changes, but, and we focus then, people are in the streets, and then on that fire that's in a dumpster somewhere. I mean, obviously those things are not helpful. But, some of the and just analyses I read, I'm just using this year as an example. There were probably 95% or more of the people just non-violently out there saying, this needs to change. And, and unfortunately, there was some of the violence, and I think Jesus would have just been as, upset about that as well. Not upset about the topic, or issue, but upset about violence.
So it's not about the violence that Jesus was excited about. It was about how people are going to change the violence that Jesus was excited about.
Well, it's how do you make change in a nonviolent way is like something extraordinary. No, nobody knows how to do that. I mean, we know a few things. There's a wonderful Gandhi quote. I don't know if I can pull it up in my head, but it's something about we know so much, and we spend so much money, that's my addition, on how to do violence, how to do war, how to build weapons, how to harm each other. And we have lots of schools and lots of money invested in how to do that, like military academies and so on. But what's the rest of the Gandhi quote is about what is yet to be discovered are so many other things that we're clueless about in the field of nonviolence. And that's not where we put our energies or our time or our teaching or our training or our money. It goes the other way. So, yeah.
And violence is always successful, right?
Well, in creating violence, yes. In solving problems, not so much.
It seems to me that as a society, we tend to be drawn to that. I mean, you think about the attention if there's a football game and a fight breaks out, the cameras go to the fight and the football game. If a lot of folks watch all the new fight stuff, I don't know what they call it. It's not boxing or wrestling, but kind of a combination of both. And the crowds that draws and the it just seems like, and I'm guilty of it too. I mean, if I hear an ambulance go down the street or see a police car go down the street, I'm prone to look out the window. I want to see what the excitement's about, and versus sitting in my chair and continuing to read a book or whatever.
Human nature. Yeah, I don't think we're exempt from that human nature interest.
Well, and it takes so much more inner strength, courage, fortitude, spirit to remain nonviolent in the face of violence when confronted with it. The easier thing is to hit the other person, at the football game or wherever. That we get, and we all get that, because that's like, yeah, I'd really like to, create some harm here because I'm pretty angry and upset. And so to counter that, takes a whole different kind of internalization, skill set, heart set, spirit, soul set, And we don't, and again, that's what takes practice and teaching and learning and commitment, because it is so counter to our quick reactions.
Yeah, which is why we have the rest of the Sermon on the Mount. All of these things seem to be kind of counterintuitive to what our natural knee-jerk reactions. So to not knee-jerk and to use your wizard brain to get another response is maybe why John Deere reads the Sermon on the Mount every single day, because it doesn't come naturally for him either. So someone want to read their version of Matthew 13 through 16? We have salt and light. We can read whatever version you have, and you can tell us what you're reading from.
I have the message. I'll go ahead and read it.
Okay.
Let me tell you why you are here. You're here to be salt seasoning that brings out the God flavors of this earth. If you lose your saltiness, how will people taste godliness? You've lost your usefulness and will end up in the garbage. Here's another way to put it. You're here to be light, bringing out the God colors in the world. God is not a secret to be kept. We're going public with this, as public as a city on a hill. If I make you light bearers, you don't think I'm going to hide you under a bucket, do you? I'm putting you on a light stand. Now that I have put you there on a hilltop, on a light stand, shine. Keep open house. Be generous with your lives by opening up to others. You'll prompt people to open up with God, this generous Father in heaven.
That's a teaching, isn't it? Trying to explain why are we here? He just gave us the answer. What am I doing here?
I really like that version. I've got to get a copy of that one of these days. I've got to order that.
Yeah, it's a real delight to see it in language that we can relate to so well.
You know, one of the things that I run into so much in the churches that I attend and speak out and whatever is people keep throwing up, well, look at what Jesus did when he was violent. He prepared a whip and drove the money changers out of the temple, and Jesus said, I didn't come to bring peace but a sword. And you know, you hear a lot of that flavor in a lot of a lot of other Christian churches other than the peace churches.
So, yeah, people have studied those verses carefully to see how that relates. And one of the things about the money changers is that the kind of whip he used was not for harm, but for like a cattle prod or something, you know, to keep. It was not an offensive weapon. It was kind of a farmer's weapon and not a military weapon. That's one of the versions that I have read. And nobody dies in the process either when Jesus turns over tables.
Well, and also just the phrasing of, I remember I met with a county commissioner one day, and he told me, he said, I remember when you threw me out of your office. Well, threw me out meant, you know, our conversation's over, you need to leave. That's not a physical confrontation. It's a dismissing of the process that's taking place. And so I think words are deceptive.
Yeah. Yeah, so what was the actual Greek? What is it translated to mean? How would Eugene Peterson translate it in the Message? You know, what do those verses sound like when we put it in today's English? Yeah, it sounds to me like you set a boundary, Fred, with that commissioner, and maybe that's what Jesus is doing here too. You know, in the boundary was, you can't have your corrupt practices inside of these walls where you know better.
Well, and all those questions you just mentioned, Gail, you know, those are important questions when you're reading a Bible text. You know, in other words, it's easy to bring our own understandings of what a whip is or whatever. And that's fine. That's based on our experience. But, you know, there's a wealth of resources to, you know, to work with that, understand that. I know that passage, one thing I know I have remembered is I think it's only John that says he used a whip of cords. The other versions, you just say whip. So, you know, that's also a clue that there's, you know, we just need to think carefully about what's being said. And for me, it says, well, I mean, I think Jesus getting angry, I think some of us maybe think, oh, that's not right. Why would God get angry? Well, we know God gets angry. How does it get expressed? And sure is a long way from driving out animals and turning over tables. It doesn't really say he whipped, you know, the people. I mean, without looking at the passage, I don't think it does. Anyway, it's a long way from that to saying, well, violence is okay it's okay for us to use violence, you know, because Jesus did. And that, I don't think that tracks very well.
It's not apples to apples.
Well, yeah, and I think that's one of the things that, you know, the brethren generally historically have said, let's be careful about. I mean, we know what violence is because so many of the Anabaptists were put to death by the state, right? And so they said, this somehow there's something not right about this. I mean, we're suffering, and that's not good, but it's not right that there should be that kind of violence as well.
So someone want to read the Robert Bowman's Bible study paragraph here and talk about that first paragraph. If someone wants to read that one.
I'll read again.
Okay, thanks, Kathy.
The focus of this paragraph, Salt and Light, is not on the glory of the disciple, but on what the disciple can do for the world. This is congruent with the message of the Beatitudes. The goal of the Christian faith is not to create Christians. The goal of the Christian faith is to create the kingdom, a society, a new world. Individual Christians find fulfillment as they become part of that purpose.
Okay, so that's a little bit controversial, maybe. Is anybody thought about that? The goal of the Christian faith is not to create Christians?
I think that's an interesting perspective. I don't know that, I don't know. You know, you compare that with the Great Commission, and is the, you know, I need to go back and read the Great Commission in multiple translations just to see, maybe again, it's how the words are used.
We're coming up to the part of the Christian year where we talk a lot about prepare you the way of the Lord. John the Baptist is going to come into Advent and say, get ready, for the kingdom is near. And that's what this passage seems to be saying by Robert Bowman. The goal of the Christian faith is to create the kingdom of heaven here on earth. So we talked about that. You know, the Lord's Prayer, for thine is the kingdom. Give us this day our daily bread. Well, no, what? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth, here as it is in heaven.
Well, and Jesus wasn't trying to make Christians either. He was simply trying to unstick the Hebrews, the Jews, the folks that were too caught up in the law and not getting what the real life in God was like and what creation was supposed to be about. So I really like when he says that. I mean, Jesus was a Jew. He wasn't a Christian. You know, it's like, what? So
that's an interesting point.
Well, if you think about it, you know, he was himself, but he wasn't, and he was looking for disciples, the Great Commission, but it was this, how are you supposed to be in the world, whether it's the Beatitudes or whether it's being salt and light in the world to bring in the kingdom.
Well, Fred, you know, your comment had me, you know, the Great Commission's the last couple verses in Matthew, right? And at least in my version, it has all authority in heaven and on earth been given to me. This is Jesus speaking. And that reminds me of what we looked at, you know, in the Lord's Prayer, as in heaven, so on earth, you know. So in other words, it's not just something where, you know, we're going to be, when we die and go to heaven, everything is great. No, there's something that's supposed to happen here. And then go therefore and make disciples of all nations. It doesn't say go therefore and make Christians of all individuals, although that's part of it. Yeah. But disciples indicates being tutored in and being changed by one's faith. So, and then it goes on to say baptizing and obeying and all those things. Anyway, that's just interesting to think about that Great Commission, that it's not just about saving souls. Part of it, but not all.
Making disciples.
Yeah.
Larry, what does your version show with the Great Commission?
That's Matthew.
Matthew 28, 18 and 19 and 20.
Okay. Matthew 28.
And by the way, there's nothing in there that says this is the Great Commission. That's just what we call it, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's something to be clear about too.
Right.
Okay, you said 18, 19, and 20. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Jesus, undeterred, went right ahead and gave his charge. God authorized and commanded me to commission you. Go out and train everyone you meet, far and near, in this way of life, making them by baptism in the threefold name, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Then instruct them in the practice of all I have commanded you. I'll be with you as you do this, day after day after day, right up to the end of the age.
Okay.
Hmm.
So that doesn't say, that says mostly what we're saying, make disciples, make followers, teach everyone.
Training to live a life.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Logan, I think you're using the same Bible too, right? Is Logan still there somewhere?
Yes, I'm still here. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm coming into the house, but yes, I use the same version of the Bible. And when it comes to, I listen to these passages about like the Great Commission and things like that, and then I see that there are some denominations that do a much better job of attempting to bring people into the church than maybe we do, but then their message is not always as graceful or as nonviolent as maybe ours is. I think that we have a way of we have something special, and I just don't know that we do. I don't know that we are living up to God's expectations of our Great Commission.
To teach that other way. This next paragraph says there are two ways to make for a disciple to relate. One is either to be just like society, conform to it. The other is to live completely opposite, like the Amish or Orthodox Jews. And then there's this third way, to live in the world, but have this radically different set of values that the Beatitudes try to teach us. So that's kind of relates to Logan's point that we can be just like the society and have people, maybe that's a path that's attractive, and a lot of churches might try that way and get a big attendance, but it doesn't seem to be all that faithful. And Amish aren't really aren't growing it by leaps and bounds either, by totally rejecting everything and that the world has to offer in this cultural isolation. They don't vote, they don't mingle with non-believers, and so this third way says that we would mingle and be teaching others. This third paragraph just really floored me. Someone want to read that? Notice where the command lies.
I'll read it.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks.
Command lies in these verses. Disciples are not commanded to be salt. They simply are. Also, they're not asked to produce their own light. The command describes where this ought to take place, in the midst of the world.
You want to keep going?
As we keep open to the kind of women and men described in the Beatitudes, the world will be seasoned and illuminated. Out of the spirit of poverty, meekness, and love, in the midst of purity, peacemaking, and suffering, the kingdom will be wrought.
So did anybody ever think about not being commanded to be salt, but just knowing that it is true that a Christian is salt. They don't have to become it. They are it. They are light.
It seems to me that there could be a lot of discussion around this in terms of what is, in essence, the basic function of the church. And I think that may differ to some extent from more fundamentalist denominations to more liberal congregations. And like I'm also thinking of organizations such as the Gideons. I know I've had some association with them, and when they go through the process, and then at the bottom line is, do you believe in Jesus Christ as your personal Savior? Sign here and you're a Christian, and then you move on. And to me, it's a little more, maybe it's more about a way of life than it is a belief system.
Oh,
Or
interesting.
maybe the two are mixed. Maybe I phrased that poorly.
Yeah,
Well,
I think it's both and. I mean, I really do. And, you know, different groups are going to have different emphases. And I don't have a problem with that. So I was listening to a podcast today. So what is Christianity and what is, you know, the nation, the world going to be like post-COVID, right? Just kind of answering that question. And it's sort of like these two or three different ways. One is, well, let's just go back to the way things were. That's our goal. And so we're going to do everything we can just to go back to the way things were. You know, a second one is, well, maybe the way things were wasn't so good, and COVID and other things are showing us that we need to, you know, change. There's some change that has to happen. So, and they called it therapeutic Christianity. You know, it's like sort of like, you know, make you feel better, kind of, you know, make a few changes, but doesn't really deal with the root of systems. And to make it short, obviously to me, Jesus was not about therapy, although he probably didn't have any, you know, not like he was against it, but he didn't get killed because he was a therapeutic Jewish teacher. He got killed because, you know, he was trying to upset the apple cart. And, you know, Sermon on the Mount will upset the apple cart, seems to me.
Yeah, someone was going to chime in. Was that Vicky or someone?
maybe, I think, yeah, it doesn't say anything at all here about being saved. It's all about being or doing, shining, and then all the previous Beatitudes about here's how you shine and put your light out. Here's how you be in the world. And yeah, the whole kingdom is you know, there's the saying, be in the world, but not of the world. So this takes you right back to the middle of being you're in everything and aware, but you're not sucked in by the culture, whatever that might be, around you. You live your life according to these particular principles and values and this sense of who you are in creation, whose child you are. You're a child of God. So what does that mean for you?
I wonder about being salt and light. So there's, you know, it's like preach the gospel, use words if necessary. You know, if you're the light, maybe, you know, you're not beating people over the head with the Bible and telling them you're bad, you're bad, you're bad. You might be saying you can be light, you can be salt, you can be great in the kingdom. Just, you know, just come inside and be, help us build. You know, who are you? Do you have, are you created by God? Then you must have something of God in you. and the other version of church is you're bad, you're a sinner, and you have to work real hard to be light and salt. And so I think that's kind of what Fred was saying, which maybe there I think there's salt and plenty of unsalt in everybody. I think we have both good and evil in everybody, so we can try to build up that good part and let the evil part kind of slide back down.
To me, those scriptures, I look at salt and light as having really no value in themselves, but it's what they facilitate. I mean, just to eat salt is not doesn't feel very good to me. But you add salt to other things, and it brings out the flavor in those things around. Light's the same way. To me, light that's great, but if it doesn't cause something to be illuminated, what's the value in it? And so to me, that's what I kind of draw out of those two illustrations.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what Bob Bowman was saying too. To live in the kingdom, and does no good to light the lamp and hide it under a bushel. So Logan, one of the first books on evangelism I ever read was called Out of the Salt Shaker and Into the World. And it said that Christians are really no good if all they do is hang around with other salt shakers.
My outlook on it, and I could have a very skewed outlook on it, I don't know, but in real life circumstance, the way that I look at it is, it's my job to the very best that I can, let's say that, very best that I can, through actions and words, to show how Jesus is, and to tell them that I'm a Christian and Jesus is my savior. But it's not my duty, it's not my place to beat him over the head with it. All I have to do is plant a seed. God will water it. So, and that's all he's asking us to do, is plant a seed and be open and accepting and non-judgmental, basically, in my opinion, and to just give that love to them. He'll do the rest. That's his job, not mine. He didn't hire me for that. So that's kind of my outlook on it.
So job one is to be your best salt and light self. Yeah.
There's a verse, I don't know where it is, that says something like, be prepared to give an account for the way you live. I mean, I'm really paraphrasing it, but in other words, your life will show that you are doing. I mean, they'll say, well, why would you think nonviolence is a good thing to do? Well, then you have a chance to enter into discussion. And I'm really kind of noticing, I post things on Facebook, and I'm getting a lot of pushback from different people. There's someone who says, someone today, I can't believe you went to the college I went to and can believe that. It's like, okay, that's fine. I mean, I'd be happy to have a discussion, although I think they indicated they might unfriend me. And I'm like, okay, it's fine if you want to do that too. I mean, I'm not, so be ready to give the account doesn't mean they're necessarily going to listen. They may, and that's what planting a seed is.
Dave, do not stop posting your stuff on social media, because if I was in a place, if we were in the same place a few years ago, I would not agree with what you post on social media. But it was that constant getting me to think and getting me to actually use my own brain and study and read and do all that. That's what caused me to change my way of thinking. So don't stop your post, please.
Well, and I would hope that people, I hope that people don't always agree with me. I mean, because I don't have it all right. But, the things that make me think is kind of what I try to post or whatever. And I mean, right now with COVID, I don't have much of an outlet, I guess. So you just do it there.
Professor Dave is on Facebook. You can take his course anytime you want.
Yeah,
Not preaching.
maybe I'll start a blog. I don't know. We'll see.
He's not preaching. He's just teaching.
Right.
Keep posting, Dave. I appreciate it.
Well, at least I get some encouragement.
Keep it up.
It doesn't bother me that people get up. If they're upset, that's fine. I mean, I think if it causes them to unfriend, well, I don't control that.
So the next parts of this lesson plan are from a website, Sermon on the Mount Discussion Guide, and it's pretty much a different perspective than Bob Bowman's that we read. And some of the things are more like an evangelical perspective, a lot of the things you find on the internet. And I appreciate a lot of what they have to say. And so it's not as if they're in opposition. They might be a different side of the salt shaker that we're looking at, or different side of the lamp that we're looking at, to help us see some more nuances. But this one says, where do you see the need for preservation and flavoring in your families, neighborhoods, workplace, and community? And so that was kind of pointing to what Logan was saying. There are people who are not seeing salt or not seeing light. They don't have a role model that would provide that. And we might be the only one that are giving them this other alternative. I certainly think that's true in the school systems. There's not always someone in these kids' lives who's paying attention to them or making sure that they're getting nourished. Some of the parents in my school system where I was working in were drug addicts, and so it wasn't easy for those kids to have their needs met when the parents were worried about having to get their addictions met.
I will say that is absolutely true. And if it wasn't for, because I did not grow up in church. My parents didn't go to church. It's not that they didn't believe in God, but just wasn't a topic. But if it wasn't for someone that really took, a couple people, more than probably a couple, but two main people that I know of. But if it wasn't for them really taking me underneath their wing and showing me that light, I wouldn't even be in this Bible study today.
Absolutely. And I wonder, would they even know that, that they did anything that was extraordinary? Would those people think of themselves as being evangelists? I don't know. Maybe they would in your life.
I think they do. They still are doing it. It was before me, and they're still doing it after me. They're still hosting, even without. They used to have church sponsorship for their youth program. Now they don't have any youth sponsorship, and they personally fund the entire thing. They even bought a bus kids to what they call the depot. So. They do it. That's just their heart. That's what they do. And they still do it to this day.
Wow. Yeah, that's how do you feel Jesus is calling you? That's absolutely how they feel they're being called. And that doesn't mean that everybody in Ohio is doing the same thing as those two.
Well, they planted seeds and God watered through other people, and that's true all of our lives. If we're trying to be attentive, and open to it. And, there are people I can think of, and some of them I've gone back to and said, you were really important to me at a certain point. And, that could be really encouraging for people to hear that. So it's something to think about. That's where you go to your first grade teacher and say, hey, you did a great job.
And also in Larry's version of the scripture, he said, this is not something that you keep. This is something that you publicize. This is not something that you keep to yourself. How many people are going to talk about religion on Thanksgiving? Maybe not the best time to bring out all your most controversial subjects, but are we too silent?
I don't know. I like the phrase, and I think maybe you used it before about um, you witness to others, and sometimes you use words, uh,
Right.
and that's paraphrasing. But uh, I guess it bothers me a little bit when I'm with people who are constantly quoting scripture and pushing me to believe exactly what it is that they believe. And so I don't know. To me, I think the lifestyle says more than the verbiage.
Right. So, yeah, how can that light shine through us um, and not be overbearing and clubbing people to death?
If you get too close to a light, it's blinding. It's uncomfortable and it hurts and it's not illuminating anything. Somebody points a flashlight in your face, it's annoying. This is not letting your light shine. This is light as a weapon, a coercive tool. And that's not helpful. And I don't think God wants us to be coerced. I think it's more to what Logan was saying about, being a critical thinker, being presented with actions, behaviors, words, and deeds, and then deciding for yourself what to do and how to do it. Being it's too much salt ruins the soup, ruins the flavor, ruins the whatever. So it is finding what's the amount, how is it being received, how does this how is it working well, so, kindly, compassionately, and care, and with care. So maybe it's just doing it with compassion and care, as opposed to, you better believe what I believe or else you're all messed up, you don't have it.
Yeah, if I'm a light on a hill, that's that's um, that's a positive attraction. It's not it's like bees to a honey, or it's like something that you want to see more of, not something that you run away from and are sick and tired of.
I think the other thing that plays into it too is sometimes when I get too preachy, that becomes kind of an arrogant perspective versus realizing that I'm a learner and I'm trying to figure it all out. I don't know it all, and I hope I continue to change over time. And so to me, to display more of the learning side of the thing would make us less, I don't know, I guess less arrogant than coming across as we have all the answers and nobody else does.
Kathy, do you see any parallels in how the light or people have been an influence in your life?
It's a great question, Gail. I really don't have an answer off the top of my head.
So have people tried to club you over the head with to be a Christian or to think, to follow this footsteps or whatever?
I not really.
That's good to hear.
One of the things I come back to quite a bit is I think about the 12 disciples or 12 apostles, and it's pretty clear they didn't like each other. I mean, they got, but they were all attracted to Jesus. I mean, in their own way, and even in the end, without getting into details about Judas was still attracted to Jesus, but got off track. So anyway, I just kind of try to remember that, because I think those guys, it's obvious they were arguing all the time over issues, and I don't mean that in a bad way necessarily, but sometimes Jesus just wanted to say, hey, cool it, I mean, there are more important things than certain things that you think are important, and that's where I think the parables and other things kind of push us back towards figuring out what it means to be salt and light.
Well, if we read these Beatitudes or the Sermon on the Mount more than just once for a Bible study, it's going to make us be odd. We're not going to look like the world around us necessarily. And so the more we read, they talk about almost every kind of everyday thing in the Sermon on the Mount, about loving your enemies and about divorce and all these other issues. And so are we willing to build that kind of kingdom? Is that the kind of kingdom we want to be a part of?
Well, it's pretty counterintuitive, and it is something. You said John Deere did it, and I remember from several weeks ago you had something, or somebody said Gandhi read the Sermon on the Mount every day. Same kind of thing. It's like, I guess I'm not doing that. And if I'm going to really infuse this new kingdom way of being in the world, that's a lot of work, and it's a lot of changing me. So but like you said, the light on the hill, you're drawn to that. You want to seek that light out, and here's the recipe, here's the map for how to find that light. So
Right. Yeah, I certainly haven't read this Sermon on the Mount every day. I wonder if it would change me. And I don't think I'm going to see the Sermon on the Mount on the news stations or in the Wall Street Journal or in the Washington Post either every day. So you're not going to get a steady diet of it by watching the news, is what I'm saying.
Well, I don't think it's something that'll keep them with their viewers. They won't be able to keep up with viewers if you start sharing that every day. It doesn't have enough crash and bang to keep people interested, basically. And some things on the Mount they could potentially be seen as like not a way of our American society.
Right. Wearing a mask is just one case in point.
Well, and to add to that in terms of, Jesus wasn't about saying Roman society or the way that Rome is thinking about things is the good way. And in fact, he was saying there's many things that need to change. And I'm still thinking about this therapeutic Christianity thing. So, the goal of therapy is not to make you feel better, although it can. The goal of therapy is to help you get your life in order, you know, and sometimes that's going to be really painful. And so, yeah, and I don't want to steal any thunder for next week, but I'm looking at verse 17, Gail. It says, I don't think I've come to abolish the law of prophets. I've come to fulfill them. In other words, so all this is tied back into Jesus's understanding. I'm real careful about not being anti-Jewish when I read the New Testament, because Jesus is just really, I mean, he's upset about certain ways things have gone, but he's appealing to the best parts of the prophetic tradition in terms of what the world should be like. So, and that for me, gosh, that's something I'm much more interested in that than I am in therapy to make it.
Right. So your speaker cups out a bit when you touch the paper or something. So I think we heard the last part of that. Okay, so that was the preview. We get the law and the prophets, and the next section is concerning anger. I don't know that anybody has any experience with anger, so that we can just skip over that part, right? I don't know. Oh, wait. So I don't know how far we'll get next time, but I'll see what the questions that come up to help us think through these issues. There's just, why did Jesus have to mess around with anger and all the stuff that we like to do so well? I don't get that.
Yeah. Can I give a cosmic commercial?
Sure.
If you get a chance, you don't have to do it tonight, but go out and look for the moon, and right above the moon is Jupiter, and right above Jupiter is Saturn, you know, and they're really pretty. Yeah, it's kind of like to the left of the moon tonight, but it's getting closer and closer to the moon as it moves. And so that's kind of to the south, you know, and oftentimes it's hard to see Saturn, but it's pretty, you know, it's a star, but you can tell they're close to each other. And Mars is in the eastern sky. So there's some pretty nice fireworks if you like astronomy.
And I also was reading that this is the week where you can actually see all of the planets. You need a telescope to get to the last ones, but the most further out ones. But it's not that, you know, it's not that you can, not just every day you can go out and see all the planets all on one time.
Right. Go ahead, Fred.
Why does all of this happen when it's cold outside? I've got a telescope, but it's cold out there.
Yeah. That's when the sky is clear, though. And yeah, these are night stars. Yeah, Venus is in the morning. You got to get up at 3 or 4 in the morning right now to see Venus. But yeah, it's just worth seeing. It's cool.
It's because there's no smoke. That's why, Fred. All right. Well, it's been great to see everybody. And thanks for being troopers here. We'll see if we can, I can't ever get, I have to stop share because I can't ever get my recording to stop. So we'll see you all in a week, hopefully. And that's the day before Thanksgiving. Is that going to work for folks?
I'm not going anyplace.
There's nowhere, you're not allowed to go anywhere.
Oh, I would love to see my kids, but I can't do it. So.
Oh, right.
It may not work for us.
Okay. Well, we'll attempt to carry on, and then we'll do our best to see you before or after Thanksgiving.